Thank you, Carrie Miigwech. Hello, I'm Robert Lilligren. I'm the CEO of the Native American Community Development Institute, or NACD, a partner on the Falls Initiative here with the Friends of the Falls organization. I want to welcome folks in Zoom land. We have an audience here as well. It's been together for a while, so I'm glad we're together in our third community conversations in this process. And we have the incredible honor of being hosted at the Prairie Island Nation. So we are standing on Prairie Island land, and we have some of the citizens of Prairie Island represented here, and also some of the elected representatives. And so I just want to acknowledge and thank the citizens of Prairie Island and Vice President Shelley Buck for being here and for hosting us today. It's a big deal to be here at Prairie Island. So thank you for that. And I also want to, there'll be some more description about the property, or project, and about our process for tonight in just a minute. But I did want to give a moment to introduce the CEO of the Friends of the Falls, who are leading the Falls Initiative here, and give CEO Mark Andrew an opportunity to say hello and maybe introduce his board members who are present, please. Mark, welcome.
Thank you, Robert. And thank you to everybody out there in TV land. I'm still not used to it, and may never get used to communicating so closely by Zoom, but I know we've got a hearty group of people out there. We welcome you and thank you. I also want to thank Robert and Vice President Buck, who has done so much for our project thus far, and all of the people of the Native American tribes who have engaged in this project. It's been a wonderful thing. It's been emotionally and spiritually rewarding. And I want to thank the Friends of the Falls Board, and in particular, I want to introduce our founders. We have two primary founders of Friends of the Falls. Neither one of them is Native, and they're probably Scandinavians, and I'm still trying to guess what Paul Riles is, but they have been what they lack in Native American blood and culture, they make up for with deep compassion, and they are humanists, and they wanted to do this project. And when the discussion evolved into making this a Native-centered project, they were the ones who stood up and said, go and do this. And probably the way that we as a board and as an organization and now as a partnership are most connected is because of the work they've assigned to us. And then I'm ever so grateful to them for giving us a long leash, and Mark Wilson in particular, and said, you guys can, we'll give you a long leash and you can go out and hang yourself if you have to, but it's up to you to bring this project home. And so I want to introduce Mark Wilson, if you'd be willing to raise your hand, as the co-founder of Friends of the Falls, and Paul Riles, who's been deeply involved in the river. And I will tell you that there is no citizen of our greater community who has done more for the upper Mississippi River than the work Paul Riles has done with his deep investment, both financial and personal, and emotional investment into the establishment of what was referred to previously as the sous chef, now the Omni restaurant. Paul had a great deal to do with that. He's had a great deal to do with everything on and near our site, and has been an extremely generous donor and giver of his time and vision to this project. So we're lucky to have you guys. And I think they're the only board members here from the Friends, but most of our board listens. It's a deeply active board of directors. We've made great strides in the past couple of years in diversifying the Friends of the Falls board, because it became clear this was going to be a native-centered and ultimately a native-led project. And so we were given directives to figure out ways to diversify the board. We've gone from one person of color to 6 people of color on our board, so we're almost BIPOC majority, and we will be during this calendar year. And I think that is reflective of the kind of commitment that we have not only to this project, but to the greater community. So thank you for being here, and for everybody else out there in the audience, we appreciate your being here. And this will be a great presentation, so soak it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. You bet. Yeah, and thanks folks joining us here in person and folks out in Zoom land. And if you were in the room, you could see we have several boards of information. They're kind of the A to Z of the project so far. Again, I'll just remind folks the objective here, the vision, the mission was to center Native voices, put Native voices in the lead. And to the credit of Friends of the Falls, the leadership, and the staff, that's what we tried to do. And we convened the Native Partnership Council, set some very particular sort of values at the center. And you'll hear more about those as we're going forward. And we've had a lot of professional help in doing this. Consultants, designers, visionaries. We have a graphic recorder, a Native woman who's making graphic recordings of our meetings as well. And you can see those at the website. They're amazing. But one of the people that has been helping us, and he is not here today, he couldn't travel due to a positive COVID test, so we wish him well. But he has been a designer, listener, that has really taken what the Native Partnership Council and the broader community conversations have been bringing into this process. And so he is with us via Zoom to walk us through the boards that we have here today. And so I'm not quite sure how to tell that he's on, but I would love to introduce David Malda, please. David, welcome. Hey, David, can you hear me?
I am David Malda with GGN. I'll be talking a little bit about one of the frameworks for thinking about the falls that we've been using to explore this project. Now, there's 4 key themes that we've talked about with the Native Partnership Council over the past months that are really guiding our thinking about this place. One is restoring a story disrupted. There's a deeper truth here. We want to be building on that. It's about not restoration of a historical condition necessarily, but really restoring fundamental relationships that are the essence of this place as the starting point for a good way forward. That this is a powerful place. There's great power in the falls, and that should still be the center of the future of this place. That this project, this effort, isn't just about building a physical site. It's not building a park or a garden. It's about building connections, it's about building relationships, and that extends far beyond the footprint of this project. That water is life. This is the truth that has been told again and again. It is always coming back to the center of this effort. The water is the center. The river is the center. And we begin with that and ask ourselves what comes next. And that's led us to really focus on the idea of the falls, Omni, as a place that brings us together, that draws so many things together. It's a place of power to continue a transformation. This is going to take a long time to get the kind of larger change that needs to happen, but there's many steps, and this is a place of engagement. As Juanita has said before, this is a place to continue a conversation, to sustain change that will take time, but can be present and drawn together here. Now that idea of the falls has led us to think about how do we build on the truth of the river, the truth of the falls here. And it's helped us to see the unique qualities that once were the upper river, the falls itself, and the lower river, where the water is now into the space of what's often called the gorge. And we see in old paintings these depictions, different qualities of water, character, relationship to land, that are really essential, but really lost through the industrialization. That we can start to imagine what this once looked like, the much bigger footprint of the falls itself, the much more complex flow of water through this place. And this is a sketch, of course, overlaid onto the existing condition here, just imagining what once was as a starting point for what should be. And that's led us to three distinct characters or qualities of place, again, thinking more about relationships and the kinds of connections between land and water and the many relatives who call this home. The upper river, open to the sky, exposed and elevated, even flow and softer relationship, connection between land and water, and fluid exchange that can happen there, a daily kind of living with the water. The falls, a place of disruption where water falls over this escarpment, this unique condition that happens only here in the entire Mississippi River. And there's power in that, the sound, the light, the spray of water, all of that is incredibly powerful, though not present today in the place that we're talking about. And of course, this was also that place where you left the river, and that brought people together in unique and special ways. And we think that that's a great story, a great power of this place to continue to think into the future. What can that do? And then the lower river, contrasting the upper, this was more complex and rocky and turbulent waters and many more conditions happening here. Variation, complexity. You moved into these islands, into the density of trees that once stood here, and the life that lived in the water, the rocks, and the trees is distinct actually than the upper river. So we think about how can this build on opportunities for the future of the place. Here an image that you can see, what it looks like today. You can still get a sense in the upper river, that relationship with land and water. Of course, there's fences and more layers that cut off that connection, but that can be opened up with time. And we can imagine softening this and really, letting that diversity of life come back, that connection, that daily centering of the river for the city and all who live here, all who call this home. And we start to imagine what that might be like. Of course, this is a real drawing of what it would look like, but we imagine the connections, education, daily life in contact with the river, bringing species back home here that support so many other relatives and birds and insects and other animals, the fish, that really can be present and live here. And this is teaching, as we learned. This is activity that's essential for us to learn and build relationship again with the river. And this will guide our thinking about what are the right things to do here. We don't want to just pick activities and say it's going to happen here. We want to know what are the right things that should be happening here to build this story, to build these relationships that are appropriate to the truth of the river here. The falls, the falling water, the power of the spray, of the noise, all of that density and strength is so important, but so cut off from this place today. So we really want to focus on, in a longer way, the bigger transformation may be bringing water back through here as it once was. But we also know the power of transformation. This is a parking lot today. There's so much that can be done to bring life back to this place, to bring that role of portage and connection and gathering and exchange in this place. And we really think that that's an exciting opportunity for this central area of the falls, to know that this is a place for teaching, for learning, for coming together, for really shaping a future where the river can be at the center. And that's going to take all kinds of work, all kinds of participation and change, certainly. But we think that that could be a good beginning for thinking about what comes next here. And we'll continue to explore, again, like I said, what are the right things to happen here, to build on and respect power of the falls, and also to tell the truth of this place, the desecration that happened here, the genocide that happened. These are stories and truths that must not be erased or must not be lost. And this, again, is an opportunity for that truth as a part of this place. And the lower river, where the water crashes down the rock, that complex edge, we imagine maybe this is where there's a different kind of immersion and connection, more diversity, more intricacy of experience, immediacy of experience. But you can really, in the middle of a city like Minneapolis, if you could come and learn from the species, the relatives that find this home by bringing those conditions back, bringing those plants back, and that complexity of water, that complexity of edge, where now there might only be grass and hard walls, that there's real opportunity in that, and that this could be a place for teaching and learning, for special activity to connect and rebuild those relationships, as I said before, again and again. And so while we're still in the early stages of knowing what a design might look like for this area, I really want to affirm the importance of talking about this framework of the upper river, the falls, and the lower river to make the truth of the land, the truth of the water, the core of this project. And knowing that this is going to be many seasons of transformation to find this bigger truth, these bigger changes, but this is a place that can support and grow that change. I'm very, very excited about that.
Thank you, David. Thank you. And now we're going to move into a conversation here, and it'll be a conversation amongst people that are here in person, but also we will be taking questions that folks who are watching on Zoom can drop in the chat, and we can do our best to respond to those questions. But we do have some guiding questions for the conversation. Those of you who have participated in the community conversations in the past or on the Native Partnership Council know that these can kind of evolve and change as we go. We've been doing a lot of groundwork or advanced work, and David did a great job of summarizing and explaining it to us. And now we're getting to a point to start visioning what can and should happen here, what shouldn't happen. What are unique opportunities of this place that support our goal of restoring a story disrupted? And what programs and partnerships can strengthen this work? And so I would invite folks here, do you have a microphone?
So I'm gonna call on our good gal Juanita. She always has a good way of starting things. Always, and all of the things that that's what happens. But again, these ladies have been part of our Native Partnership Council, Juanita, Shelley, and the others have given such great voice to all of this, and the work that's been captured by David Mulda in your handouts, and for what the folks in Zoom were able to see today. These are nothing that's set in stone. These are the things that we've been hearing and the themes that have been emerging across our discussions. And so this evening, with these three thoughts in mind, we'll give the mic over to Juanita for a second.
Take the mic. I'll echo. See, I'm echoing. The one thing I actually love more than anything about this piece of the presentation is that we now can have visuals. We can see some of the ideas and images of what the river looks like, that we don't really or haven't really seen in the past. So I like that idea of that is something that should have happened and is happening now, but to what degree will people like the Johnsons, who just became familiar, how many other people can become familiar with what is possible in terms of our ability to care for the river, to care for our children's ability to go there, and what that would mean, and what that would look like. What are some of the ways that we need to put in place the seventh generation of education around care and guidance and support of the river, and what it means to our way of life, and a way of life for all of us who live here. I think the most important thing for me today has been that I've been asked to help facilitate prayer, and I really appreciate that responsibility, because it reminds me that that is, in essence, the way our people always did things. Is we didn't just decide to do something. We ask for guidance on all levels, and I think that's the piece that I most appreciate today, is that we are asking for that kind of guidance as well, and recognizing the earth as a spirit and her ability respond to us and give us guidance as to what really should happen here. But in addition to that, I think the fact that our young ones were here today and, you know, little ones are hearing that this is something, so it's putting that spark in the air and that idea that they can change something, they can make something happen, that they are a part of that story that is going to be told now. And so that part of it, I really I appreciate the process we're using to bring a whole community of people into the conversation and continuing to weave that story into something that is much more solid and much more refined and close together and beautiful than what we've seen in the past, which has been kind of not as tightly woven, you know. And I think we're finally getting, I said it uniquely, that we're going to have a place at the table, but now we are also, you know, helping to decide what stories need to be heard at that table. I think that's kind of a thing for us, that everyone has a story, and we're finding a way to hear that story.
See, I told you guys.
So don't forget, you all gotta say something.
Yep, we all gotta participate today. Yep, that's right. Kelly?
Turn now. Thanks. Well, as Badeo Kantuan Dakota, our creation story has us coming literally in human form from the waters in Minnesota. So for us, water literally is life. And this body of water, this area, is very sacred for many reasons. And there were a lot of things that our people lost over the years because of federal policies, boarding schools, things like that, some of the things that were passed down from generation to generation. And I think with this location, we're able to regain those and continue those and teach the younger generation as well as the older generation, because there are ones my age that don't know a lot of the stories, the histories, those sacred areas and what ceremonies had to be performed in those sacred areas and the significance of those. So I think it's important to help bring our people back and bring our relatives back. Like the area there around St. Anthony Falls, she's been waiting for us. I mean, the way we view the world, everything, the land, the earth, the water, the plants, the trees, the animals, everything has a life force, everything has a spirit. They're all our relatives. So when you view the world in that way, you tend to respect things a little more, you tend to do things a little differently. And I think we need to remember that when we are working at bringing this area back. And there's a lot of special ceremonies, special sacred items and such that need to be done. And she's waiting for us. She's been asking for us, and we're finally coming and bringing her back to our people. And so I think making sure that there are opportunities for our people, whether it's through Dakota or other Native nations who have a relationship with her, to give them an area to be able to do the things that they need to do for their culture. That's kind of away from the public eye, you know, away from people gawking at them. It's a relationship we have personal with her, and we need to have that area. I'm really leery. I understand an economic side of the issue there, but the economic side of it scares me a little, just because she is so sacred and has so much meaning for us that the economic side of things should not be forefront. Like when I say economic, I mean like businesses, stores, whatever is being thought of to put here. I just want to make sure that it doesn't overcome and overtake what she really is and what the purpose of her really is. And I think for so many years, as you can see, the economics have taken over her, and that's hurtful. Like, Carrie said, before this started, we had someone give us that presentation where they had the picture of what St. Anthony Falls used to look like versus what, with an overlay on top of that of what has happened to her, and it broke my heart. I could feel her pain. Yeah.
Thank you, Shelley, for those really important and heartfelt words. And I think it's really a reminder to folks, especially the non-native folks that are participating in the conversation. These aren't easy conversations to have. These are painful, often painful for Native people to engage in. It triggers, it evokes emotion, it evokes a sense of loss. So just to put that out there so people understand that this isn't always an easy conversation for Native folks to be in. But I think you did a great job, Shelley, talking about what could happen here, what you don't want to have happen here, sort of payday or the economic interests, and pushing more important aspects out. So thank you for that. And others in the room around these ideas, what should happen here, what shouldn't happen here, what are the opportunities here, what partnerships do we need? I think you have something nice to say.
Let's see. I heard stories about Spirit Lake. Me and my dad likes to take me to these special places. And we'll sit down there and we'll just be quiet for a minute. And then he starts talking about the stories. And one of the stories was about Spirit Lake. And he told me that this woman would go there and they would give birth to their children. And he told me that story right around 2017. And he said, one day maybe we're gonna have this place back to us, and then it'll come back to us. And that was a while ago, and so this is my first meeting coming here. And I just kind of put that together that, I really want these places to come back to life so that my other relatives and my other cousins can sit with their relatives and have them hear these stories about how these places are important for us and integral for our Dakota. And all these teachings and all these stories, I don't want them to go away, and I want them to be heard again. And so my only wish is that you give us this opportunity to let our ancestors be heard again.
Oh my
And
God.
I'm really thankful for giving this opportunity for us. Thank you.
Beautifully put, very powerful, and one of the things that you said about me that really resonated is I've heard it not just around this process, but around other kinds of design conversations, the Waterworks Park, for example. I think he said you don't want a place to go where people aren't docking. And I think it was super important. I think that's really important. Acknowledging how sacred this place is and acknowledging the important things that need to happen here. How can it happen in a respectful way and in a good way? It isn't sort of a tourist or economic approach. Others in the room, what should happen here? What shouldn't happen here? Great. Sure, so this is from Leah, maybe at Prairie Island Community. Okay, Shelley's not, she knows what we're talking about. There's an opportunity for this land to be returned to tribal ownership and management. It is a small amount of land, but important for the future of this special space. Is there potential to remove the dams? What will happen with the sediment loaded behind them? This should be thoughtfully considered. And this question of ownership comes up repeatedly, and the possibility of changing the infrastructure, of removing the dam. And I don't feel qualified to even comment on that, but maybe, Mark, do you feel like you could say something about that, or do you want me to just muddle through? Cool. So, So that isn't really a central part of the conversation here. And at the beginning of this process, and I've been through hundreds, thousands of these kinds of processes, design processes, and I would have said that would never even have been considered. Well, I don't know. That piece of infrastructure is there. It's huge. It's heavy. Somebody's going to have to be taking care of it. It may be, and I'm not saying this would ever happen, but it could be that the economical approach is I need to remove it. I will say that's going to be expensive, and as Leah said, needs to be thoughtfully considered. But I don't know, at this point I would say nothing's on the table. Nothing at all. And it'll take considerable support. I would say, what I'm saying is federal support to accomplish that. Yeah, please, Karen.
In my travels and in my discussion across the Twin Cities and just, all these places that I've been, that's what people have said, oh, are they going to take the land back? Is this going to be a land back thing? And, it's about more than that. And I really have to appreciate our little sister over here, talking about the stories that she was sharing with her father and how it's so important that, we have to continue and be able to give voice. And as Shelley had said, she's going to let us know what's going to happen. We've got quite the story coming through here. But I truly believe that, we are in control literally of nothing. We give that to the Creator. We speak with Him, but He's ultimately going to be the one to tell us what's best for us, and will lead us to people like Barb and our board members here and our supporters and stakeholders to help us and guide us through this process. And there's a comment here from Tammy from Zoom. Thanks, Tammy, for your question. She says land back and healing. And that's exactly what this is really all about. First and foremost, it's about healing. It took us a while to get to the table. It took us a while to have a seat at the table. They finally opened up something for us here. And that doesn't mean we're going to come right over here and start giving everything we got, because you know what? We're hurt. This is a hurtful thing. You took our spirit from us by taking us and pushing us aside and taking and making us go live somewhere else. Dakota people felt it most significantly at this site, but I can tell you across this great United States, Indian Territory all the way, land backs happening in a lot of different places, and we can be an example of how that is done in a good way that makes us a good relative, no matter what or how anybody treated us. Oh,
Very powerful. Thanks, Carrie. I don't know if folks on Zoom could hear it or not, but we just experienced kind of a heavy rain and hail. It was very loud in here, so I'm glad we had to
Giving us a message.
Yeah. So again, what should happen here? What shouldn't? What are some opportunities, and what are the programs and partnerships that can help? Anyone here in the room? Yeah.
Hello, my name is Levis. I'm from here, and I was just awestruck that we are having this conversation right now, because that was really in my heart when I do some research about the landmarks and our sacred rocks and sacred things that used to be here. It was powerful. So to even have this talk of coming and having a say in such a significant part, I think that's really powerful. And I'd like to thank Shelley for bringing this to our attention. I think it's really what we needed to hear, during our COVID and lost some relatives. So this would be a good place to come to pray to, say our prayers or remember in a good way. But but in my readings, I had talked to an uncle about this, and he said that there was a mammoth there, and that mammoth was kind of like one of our sacred beings there. I'm not sure what happened to that mammoth, but that was our prayer site. Yeah, so I like to share that the prayer site was already established at the mammoth, wherever the mammoth was found. Right, thank you.
Thank you. What, is that something you can share, Shelley?
It's also, I too have done some research because a lot of the stuff was lost to me through the trauma of boarding schools, but it was also a place, it is also a place where Tehi, who is a, I guess in English you call him a god, a water god that lived there at the falls, and that falls were so important for him, and you know, everything has a place in life, everything has a purpose in life, and he too had a purpose in life, and the falls, that area was his home. And so, you know, for me personally, I want to get this home back to him and hope that he shows himself again to us to help us. So there's so many stories, so many meetings, so many special and important things at this fall, as well as other places throughout Minnesota. And so I'm glad we're having this conversation. I want to thank the Falls and the founders and everybody who's been involved in bringing this to us and being open and willing to have those conversations, because it's not easy and it's a lot of emotion. I'm not one that cries, and it seems like now that I'm old, I cry all the time. So, but thank you for that, because we've not always had that. We've always had to fight to even try to get our foot at the table, but you were willing to listen, open to having all of us here. So,
Say the name of the.
Tehi, at least that's how I learned it.
Very powerful. Thank you for sharing that and have him show himself again. I think that's really a beautiful. Yeah. Okay. I'll let you ponder. Okay, ponder. We'll come back. We'll come back. Anyone else? Something to add? What should happen here? What shouldn't happen here? Mr. Johnson, I got a feeling you're going to say something. I'll come over. You're one of the few people in the room older than me, so I will respect my elder here.
Bonjour. This is powerful. I'll try not to cry. Some good things are coming out of this. My wife and I left Minneapolis. We never really left because our grandkids are here. We're back and forth. But we lived away for about 15 years up in Pequot Lakes. Learned a lot about Indian people up there as well. I'm a member of the Turtle Mountain Band of Ojibwe in North Dakota. And I also find out that now they're going to kick me out of Turtle Mountain because I'm not a quarter blood anymore. Because I'm 1/8 Sioux, 1/8 Ojibwe. So if the BIA was going to allow me to stay, I would not qualify for Turtle Mountain's membership because I am no longer 1/4 Sioux. My wife found that out. She's a professional genealogist. She's discovered all kinds of things about Indian people. And I tell you, one of the nice things about Indian people, we talk about what's happening here. There's Father Sky, Mother Earth. And then the thing I like to talk about with the little kids is because, yeah, a lot of the elders don't know what's going on today or what happened in the past. But it's those young ones that need to know, and they're hungry for that. And when you talk about a dream catcher, catching the dreams, letting the bad ones get caught, letting the good ones go through, we have to get to our kids. And I think this project has a way of helping them. But I like to look at number two. What are the unique opportunities in this place that support our goal and story? I think we need to expand that story because there's a big, big story that can be told about this river that that flows from up by Bemidji all the way down to New Orleans. And it flows right through Minnesota, and it's, people don't realize that the Pequot Indians lived here for a while. And a sad story happened to them. But we have our Ho-Chunk brothers and sisters that also are here. And if we can get together and work together, it's going to show something good for all people. My wife and I were walking down Centennial Lakes on Saturday, and we ran into an African-American couple. And I think Father Sky is bringing something good, is revealing something to my wife and I, because he told us a story about Hennepin County and their library system. There was to be a new library in Southdale, and I won't go into that, it's a sad story. And it never happened. And yet they told us about a story about what's happening. He's an African American who is now the district representative, district president, or whatever it is, of the Rotary International. And Rotary is now reaching out to help where they want to get Native Americans involved. Because we know the Rotary, and I don't mean to say something wrong here, but the Rotary are aware, there's a club that was once made up of wealthy white men that did good things with their money. Today, Rotary now has women involved. And now they want to reach out, and they're doing this in Canada to help Native Americans. And I think I'm going to close by just saying this one thing. There's opportunities to tell a bigger story about the falls and the river. And there's ways we can get it done. I was working on a project that helped get something going. My partner is now at dementia and is in a nursing home. A prominent person here, an African American. And I guess I'm going to give you his name because some people know him as Archie Gibbons. And if you know Archie, his heart was here. And we had a project for Fort Snelling that can be tied into this. The Ryan companies, why can't we get them involved? Because that's a pretty valuable property there along the river. We can, if we just work at it. And if we come up with the idea that everybody in this world is what's going on throughout the world with the shootings and so on, so if we just remember that we all bleed the same colored blood. Thank you.
Thank you. So some of the unique opportunities, also some of the partnerships, the private sector business, community developers, landowners, are also potential partners. So thank you for that. Thank you for the powerful words as well. Other ideas, what could happen here, what shouldn't happen here? What are some unique opportunities? What programs or partnerships? Mark, did you want to say something?
I'm actually not eager to say anything other than to ask a question of the Native American participants. And that's a question about the use of the site. And one of the things that we've talked about at Friends of the Falls is, you want the site to be developed, or do you want it to be naturalized? Do you want it to be commercialized, or do you want it to be restored? And we concluded, meaning the Friends of the Falls concluded a long time ago, we're Wasichu. It ain't ours to decide. And so we need to hear what the Native American community wants around the issue of develop or not develop, naturalize, or create something else like Native American Interpretive Center or other kinds of bricks and mortar things. And we're getting to the point in our conversations where we want to hear about that. So my comment is really a question. If you had to make a decision about how you'd like that site to look when it's completed, what would that include?
I think what our people probably would wanna do is, treat it like how we would treat, their view. You know, have standards, that are, that when they come into this place, they have to be respectful of their actions and their tones and respectful of their, you know, where they're bringing, not, you know, making sure that there's not gonna be anything like inappropriate when somebody's praying right there. As far as development, I'm not sure, I think it's pretty expensive to move that thing. Alright, then, I'm not sure, how are we gonna restore something that, you know, we really can't get to with, you know, that dam being there? But as far as, importance of historical landmark, I would say, like, if I was dreaming it, probably get rid of the dam, probably put a plaque up, making it, traveling accessible, and have them, have ceremonies come back there.
Thanks for sharing that. That's something that we've heard from other groups as well. A lot about ceremony, access to the water, being able to touch the water.
So you mentioned a dream. I wanna share my dream with you all. And my dream is coming true, which excites me tremendously. And it does bring me to tears. So when we were negotiating and talking and, you know, what's my role gonna be, all that formal stuff, I was talking to that girl that with the glasses that came on here first. Her name is Kirsty. I call her my lady because she's just a good lady, you know. And so behind her there was this portrait, and it looked like grass, tall prairie grass. And here it was a portrait that she had created herself. We were on Zoom, so I was watching her there, you know. Well, that night I went to bed, put my tobacco down, prayed to my drum. What am I gonna do with this? I'm just an old Ojibwe girl. What do I know about all this? You know, and my dream, I could see that grass, and I could see the water behind the grass. And there was these figures, couldn't see their face. They were like, and my people will understand this, spirits, the ancestors were in front of that grass. And so I keep that in my mind because that's telling me that we need access. We need to have access there for ceremonies. It needs to be protected. It needs to be respected. And I don't believe that there are some in the broader world that don't understand what it means when you just throw something down on the ground like that, you know, or they don't recognize the space that they're in. We would never go to somebody's site, sacred site, if there was a cross there or whatever it was, and disrespect it. That's not how we are. And that's important. There's gotta be some respect and acknowledgement. Without that acknowledgement that this truly belongs and was and has ever been Dakota territory, and a place where the Ojibwe people and the Ho-Chunks, and we had all that, we had our own economics and our own industry going on. Another thing that I was looking at when I was doing the research, looking at the falls or actually looking at historical pictures, and I kept coming across the same picture of all these men on logs, and they were the ones that were moving the logs down the river. And everybody assumes those men were white people. Wrong. Both of my grandpas on both sides, from Mille Lacs and from Leech Lake, were those loggers. My grandpa owned a team of horses. He was skidding logs out of the forest, big logs, and bringing them down to the river, and he had 14 sons. My dad was the youngest of 14, and then he had 2 sisters. Big family, big gardens, big community. Everybody worked. All the men would work in the woods all day, and those were the guys that were riding those logs down the Great Mississippi. Then they'd meet up with the Indians over in Mille Lacs, and they had access to that water too, and my other grandpa on that side, same thing. But you know what they did before any of them got into the water? Put their tobacco down. We're taking of this forest here so that we can feed our families, and we're gonna do this work respecting you. It's important. So I think the whole idea of restoration is a possibility. I mean, again, nothing is off the table. We have made no decisions on anything. I'm so thankful for this team and David Malda, the guy you just seen on the video. He's from a company, GGN, for really listening. If you look at those boards, those words over there, the pictures, he blends it. He hears both things because the ancestors are speaking through us, and he can hear that. And that's what he puts on those pictures. And in this packet that you got, there weren't just all white people in there. He's blended our ancestors and what we've told him and used our words and English words. And so again, this is going to be a place of many cultures as it was historically. You know, there was African Americans too that came and worked. This was about working for the families at that time. We had an African American family come to Leech Lake, Bonga, and he integrated into my family's village in Onegum. And he's a respected man, and so is his family. And he married an Indian woman, and they built a home and a life there with us. He probably worked and helped and skid out all the logs and all that stuff. You know, and again, I think your people were right there with us. Not just because of the work, but I think kind of like what you said, I gotta be nosy and see what's going on and what are they doing? You know, because again, that was all very new to us. We didn't know what they were gonna do or what these big things that they're bringing in here and what's that white stuff that's coming out of there? Flour. We didn't have much for flour. We didn't even use flour. They always say fried bread's Indian. That's not Indian. That stuff came from the federal government when they gave us flour and lard and, you know, what they thought was basic. Well, shoot, the hunting wasn't any good where they put us in the first place, so we had to use what they gave us and, you know, take the small game that we could. And that's the other piece of this too, is the environmental, the four-leggeds, the swimmers, the flyers, they're there, but they're hiding. Because they're just like what us Indians used to be, looking at all these white people, wondering what they're gonna do next. So I really like what you have to say about dreams, because they say quite a bit. That's our way, that's their way of communicating with us, is through our ancestors. So I appreciate you.
One thing I want to make sure that we have there, and I don't want to forget it, so I would like to see Dakota language there. Not only for our people who have lost the language or are trying to get the language back, but also for non-Native people, non-Dakota people. I think it's important that she hear the words, the language that she's used to hearing. And so I think it's important to have, like we do at our community garden across the street, or our elders garden across the street, and some other things that we do around here at Prairie Island. We try to have the Dakota language, like little signs or something that have the Dakota language of what it is, the English name. And then you could even take it a step further and even have it recorded, one of our people saying the word, so you know how to properly say it in Dakota. But I think that's important as an educational piece to have that, because that's the original language that she understood.
Thank you, Shelley. Thank you to Carrie, especially for sharing your dream. It's very meaningful. So, comments, and I'll remind folks that are participating through Zoom, you can drop comments and questions into the chat, and then they'll be shared here as well. This is from a Zoom participant named Crystal, and she kind of goes towards the partnerships question. And Crystal asks, what role could local historical societies from the larger watershed play? And then she adds, the Golden Valley Historical Society is located near Bassett Creek. And then she has the Dakota name, and I hesitate to say it, Hahawapanam, something like that, which connects just above the falls. And folks, I don't know if you don't know, there's a lot of local conversation about re-sunlighting, resurfacing Bassett Creek. It's been running through a tunnel or a culvert through industrialization, colonization. And then also, Crystal says, many local societies would be happy to follow, support, and partner on Native initiatives. So yeah, thanks for that, Crystal. And I would expect to call from someone from the project teams very soon to find out how this partnership might play out or might work. So I appreciate that offer, and I think that this is going to take a lot of partners. And I really commend Friends of the Falls leadership, staff for what they've done so far. They've just done heavy lifting at the federal level, state level, local level, just to kind of get this rolling. But this is a really important spot. The historic power of this location still kind of sings through the city of Minneapolis. This is a jewel in the central riverfront of downtown. There have been decades of conversations, and many people have been part of those, of how to best feature this part of the river in general, as sort of that identifying feature of Minneapolis, the water city. So we accept, I guess, Crystal, that partnership, the idea of partnership. And I wrote to your last comment, Crystal, I just want to add, you say many local societies would be happy to follow, support, and partner on Native initiatives. And I know that the Native folks in this room are aware of that interest in partnering, and the qualities of those partnerships really rely on things that are happening here: openness, authenticity, vulnerability, willingness to share, willingness to not share, willing to trust. Thank you, Juanita, about trust. And throughout this and Mark can validate this, we have talked about this is really a trust building exercise, right? That's really what we're doing. So we're moving forward. And so again, thanks for reaching out the hand of partnership, Crystal, and I'm sure you'll be hearing from us soon. Juanita, did you want to say something?
We've looked at some models, and I don't know, are people able to see this on the Zoom? I mean, some of the models and things that we've been looking at around different design ideas around the river and stuff, and how, one of the however many initiatives we create there, we're not trying to turn it into kind of a Disneyland deal or a spot you have to go to, but more of a recognition that it's a place of prayer. And so as much as possible to have what we were hoping to see was more intimate relations to the river being built and affirmed by the nature of the access that gets created. And so I don't know how people feel about that. Sometimes they like the bigger is better. And certainly I think any kind of center that would help to welcome and educate and give people the 411 on how to take care of the land and themselves would always be good. But as much as possible to look at the fact that some of the things that we're trying in these conversations is to get affirmation for that idea that we all individually want to have an intimate relationship to the river, and we want others to have that same understanding and not be, you know, like I go to the river, but there's so many people there now because that park is so big and you can't even park or get close to it. So I don't want people to think you guys did that. So, and the other thing is keep in mind, you know, Native people have a really tough time today understanding or dealing with this idea of all of a sudden owning property. And we know we never will own the property, but we know we will always have a responsibility to care for it. So I think that's something we need to really transfer to other people, is that they are merely caretakers at this time, no matter who they are, and that we all have to play a role in that, in understanding that relationship to everything around us.
Anita, beautifully put, and you know, just heard this from you, Noni, just this idea, pretty much everyone actually that spoke, and you know, it centers on this idea of respect and things like that, but it's really about respecting the water, respecting the land, respecting each other. And some of the themes that have really come forward through these conversations is that the river is living, it has rights, water has rights, land has rights. And these ideas of the rights of land, the rights of water, you know, aren't brand new. They're actually very old, but they're ideas that you're hearing, you know, come to the surface in a number of places, internationally, nationally. But really, I think it's such a different perspective. Shelley, you said this earlier. If you look at the water as your relative, the land as your relative, the sky as your relative, every living thing as your relative, you treat it in a different way. You treat it like a relative. And this is just something that's really been near and dear to my heart, which is the idea that these indigenous values and perspectives can really help us through difficult times in our history here. You know, we've polluted, we've destroyed, we've disrespected, and so how can these respecting the rights of the water, respecting the rights of the people who are engaging with the water? I think that's a big deal thing that I think is really being lifted up by this project and this process.
I have to say also too, Robert, that one of our own Native Partnership Council members, Joaquin Lapointe, he is a member of the United Nations Indigenous team, for lack of a better, but he's there. He's right there talking about the rights of water. This is a young man. But he's been listening. He's had opportunities as a young man to learn his language, to know his history, to know his ceremonies, to know what respect and honor is. And he presents this indigenous worldview, is what you're talking about being that good relative. He's sharing that at an international level. Young man from here in our cities. You know, that's just amazes me. It totally just amazes me, because again, I'm 63 years old. I would have never thought that we would sit at the United Nations. I've had the opportunity to sit there myself to talk about the rights of wild rice. I've raced since I was 19 years old with my husband. I've been with him over 40 years now, and he's never thrown me into the water yet, but but again, it's all about the rights of water and an indigenous worldview that we have maintained through our oral histories and some, what do they call, pictographs, you know, that they find in some of the caves like they have in St. Paul. So, I mean, and these drawings that have emerged, if you'll notice in your packet, it always has reference to those ancestors in these pictures. And so, David Malva, you're listening, everybody's listening, so I appreciate that.
Thank you, Carrie. And if someone wants to add something to the conversation, just jump up. Yep. Where's that? Yeah, great.
I am Bonnie Jean. Just wondering, at what point are you with GNN in the So like, let's say you came to these models, you have some models, and I would see them over here? Okay, and then,
And in your packet. Yeah.
so I'm concerned about, when they say equitable urban access, I'm worried about overlining, the things that disrespect the relatives that travel the waterways, the insects and the birds and everything. And when I lived on the river in St. Paul, the coyotes would come by to do their mousing from one area to another because they needed food and there's no food. And if we take and make it too accessible for too many humans, obviously we're not making it accessible to all our other relatives.
Excellent point. Thank you, excellent points, thanks for sharing. And thank you. And I'm gonna go to a couple of comments or questions that came in via Zoom. One is, how are tribal nations included in these conversations? And that is a very good question. And so we're in a tribal nation right now having this conversation. And when we started to try to figure out how to best center Native voices and put them in the lead, I mean, we explored a lot of different possibilities, and we hit on the strategy of engaging the voices of the people who were here, the descendants of the people who were here before, who were here first. And we sought guidance from elders, from community members, from people who have been doing this work, like Mady Lawrence at the Wakatipi Project at the Buciento Wildlife Reserve in St. Paul. And we hit on the strategy to start by engaging the 4 Dakota nations in Minnesota as being sort of authentic voices that to start the engagement. So that's where we started, was by engaging those nations, those tribes in the conversation. And I really have to commend Prairie Island Vice President Shelley Bach for really picking this up. And I hadn't heard so much depth of her vision of the falls until tonight, and now I really respect why Shelley is picking this up. But so that's where we started, and then kind of started to expand out from there. Though mostly Dakota community voices, mostly women, and in many Native cultures, water is a women's sort of area issue, and so but expanding outward from there. But we had to start with this core of what we thought were authentic voices, and so this question also hits on, I think, something interesting, and this is part of what really interests me as kind of a systems person, and that is the geography of Native nations is very arbitrary, right, and federally prescribed overall, and so really all of that land is Dakota land, but technically, legally, as per the federal government, the tribal voices are sovereign on their nations. Right now, we're in the sovereign nation of Prairie. So when we leave here, that sovereignty isn't portable, right? I should say the essence of the sovereignty is portable, but there isn't a tribe that has formal sovereign authority over these falls right now. So part of what I think is so interesting about this process is trying to figure out how to really authentically give authority to those sovereign voices in an area where they technically don't have formal sovereignty. So it's kind of a simple question, but it's kind of a nuanced and complicated kind of issue. Then another question that comes over Zoom is from Kathy, so thank you. Has there been discussion of partnership with the National Park Service, perhaps provide management, expertise, funding, but allow Native community to retain control of the property and prioritize access for ceremonies and other uses, perhaps charge non-Native visitors an admission charge? And so the quick answer about the discussions with National Park Service is yes, and I don't know if Mark wants to step up and maybe talk a little more about the history, but there are very complicated, interrelated levels of governmental jurisdiction right here in this spot. And so there's been conversations at the national, state, regional, county, and city level with the parks people. There's actually an ongoing conversation between all of those And I don't know, Mark, did you want to elaborate a little on that?
Just to clarify, yes, we definitely have a relationship with the National Park Service. Paul Riles and has funded several initiatives with them. There's a nonprofit organization called the Mississippi Park Connection, which works very closely with the National Park Service. They conduct the tours, so people who are down at the river in the summertime, and you can get on the lock, go see the lock and see the falls kind of up close. That is a National Park Service directed. They do the tours, and then our organization contributes to the staff people to do them.
I've also had the opportunity, just because I wanna know who's doing what out there, research, Google is my friend, found that the National Park Service has a very unique relationship with the Grand Portage Band of the Minnesota Chippewa tribe at their falls up there in Grand Portage. They're, and again, here I'm aging myself. So my dad was part of the CCC camps, and those were camps that were created to provide jobs for men and to help develop infrastructure, roads, trails, all of that kind of stuff. And so the National Park Service, and this conversation is really young, I just talked to them about a month ago, talked about their strategy, which was to let the native voices in this partnership decide how, when to move on some of these trails and parks. And the Park Service, it was part of their agreement with the band to hire the native people. So it provided all kinds of jobs, and they were working in their natural environment, so they knew where to, you know, cut the rock, because they're all up in there hunting. They know where all that stuff is. And so again, that was a really interesting conversation, and yeah, I went in through the back door and researched all the native people that were on their staff and team, and asked if they'd be part of it, and, you know, what are their thoughts in working in all of this, and I've heard nothing but good things. They respect us, they respected our recommendations, and it was just a really interesting conversation, because again, this is this is federal saying that, and you never expect that, I would never expect that from a federal entity, so I just think that's important, because there is a little model up there where it has been, we have had our say, and it's turned out, and it's a successful project, it's right on the border there. I walked into their gift shop up there, and there's all the Indians are working in there, and you can see Indians, road workers, and so there's still, that partnership is still there for their people, so I really appreciate that of them.
Thank you, Carrie, and I just got a recommendation that came in from Zoom, thank you, this is from Tammy. Tammy recommends hosting a community conversation within the Minneapolis Indigenous community. Good recommendation, and I will say for folks who are around the Twin Cities, this Saturday, so just 2 days away, will be the Minneapolis Community Connections Conference. It's an annual event, it's been interrupted because of COVID, so this is the first time back together. It's this Saturday at the Convention Center in downtown Minneapolis. It's from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And there's a dedicated discussion on the Falls Initiative from 10:30 to 11:45 a.m. So please join us. And I think I'm gonna come over here, if I may, and here's an idea from the shy one.
I'm not shy, I've never heard anything about this. This is the first time I've ever heard.
Thanks for being here.
So, my name is Angelica, and I was just thinking about reduce the building numbers and that, is to build an app. So people can walk around and have that, where they're standing, need to identify where they are, what each you need here, just to reduce all the building space. principal information, donations, local upcoming events, awareness, something to use all building,
I love it. Thank you, great idea. You can also, you can see, you can identify plants, animals, medicines, very cool, very cool. Yeah.
Thanks, Robert. I just wanted to ask a question. I've sort of assumed that in some way we would educate people about indigenous history, culture, and values at this site. And my question is, to what extent do indigenous people want that to be totally focused on indigenous people? And to what extent would you want it to be focused on non-indigenous people?
Yeah, Shelley has the things.
I always say, you can't have Minnesota history without starting with Dakota history. And so I think if you start there and move forward, that's fine, because we all share the space at some point in time. At some point in time, that area means something to everyone. And I think it's important to tell all those stories. I think that's where we failed in particularly this state, this country, when it comes to all the stories being told. They're not all told. Our stories haven't been told. And if they've been told in a watered down way. So I think it's important to have both, but you have to start with the Dakota or the original caretakers, along with others. I mean, the area has a different meaning to each different individual, so.
I didn't express my question very well. I'm
I
assuming.
like your answer. Sure.
I'm assuming that we're only interested in indigenous history. The question is, do we want to educate non-indigenous people about indigenous history?
Yes.
How important is that?
It's very important, because you have to understand who we are and where we come from in order to be able to work better together. And I think that's where we lack in this country, and particularly this state, with different groups of people, because they don't understand us. They think we're just some character from the pages of their history book. But until they actually understand what we've been through and where we've come from, to know that our people, the Dakota people in Minnesota, and I'm talking all Dakota, not just here at Prairie Island, there was the 1862 war, Dakota War. After that war, they exiled the Dakota out of the state. Here at Prairie Island, we stayed here, we didn't leave. But to now know that a Dakota tribe, even though we stayed here, the Dakota were exiled at one time, the Dakota here at Prairie Island have the second largest hotel property in the state of Minnesota, a state that didn't want Dakota people here. We now have a presence, and I think it's important to know how important that is. If you just heard that, it'd be, oh, cool, good for you guys. But to know where we've come from and the struggles we've had in order to get to where we are, the largest employer of Goodhue County, and a lot of the tribes here in the state can say they're the largest employer of the counties. And to know the struggles that our ancestors went through, it's a miracle I'm sitting here with you. Some have called it an act of defiance that I am here, a defiance against those federal policies that tried to make sure I wasn't here. So I think it's very important that non-natives understand that history, to understand that we're still here, we still have a lot of our culture, a lot of our traditions, a language. We're just revitalizing it even more to the younger generations. So it's very important for the non-indigenous people to know our history.
Well, I'm relieved to hear that answer, because that's what excites me about the project. Is to give visibility to indigenous history, culture, and values. I think many people don't know anything about it, and if they do it, they would respect it.
Exactly. 100% agree.
Same here, 100% agree, and I think your last comment too, that people just don't know, right? It's like other Native people here, you know, we get to talk to non-Native groups of people, and invariably they come up. People our age, They'll say, wow, I didn't know any of that. Why didn't I know it? Why don't I know any of that? They'll say. It's not accidental, but you don't know any of it. Right, right. And so I would put the couch kind of those under two sort of top umbrellas or something. And one is truth telling. And it's a very difficult thing. It's difficult on both sides. It's difficult to do that. But if we're not, we need to be willing to engage in truth telling to move forward and to engage in change. And the other is, I would call it under narrative change. And there's a huge effort amongst contemporary Native folks in this country to strategically and deliberately steer our own narrative. And this is part of that, right? We're participating in that right now. It's changing the narrative. And so this is a huge opportunity to do that. But it takes people like you to be willing to sit in some maybe uncomfortable conversations or truth tellings, and to get there. So we're doing the work.
There was a comment on how to gain sovereignty over that specific area. It brought up my recollection of the Ojibwe, I don't remember if it was Fond du Lac, I think it was Fond du Lac. They got Sears Building in downtown Duluth designated as their own, their sovereign space. So, I mean, this is something that can be pursued.
Thank you for that. And I would say if the will is there, just about anything is possible. And we got to be sure that that's something that Native people, as well the Dakota people, are interested in. There are responsibilities, costs that come with property ownership. And again, this site is really a focus of a lot of interest. This piece of the central riverfront in downtown Minneapolis. So, yeah.
Bill and I had the opportunity to be in Washington, D.C. last fall when the weather was absolutely gorgeous and we had no desire to be in Boston. And we did Arlington Cemetery and we did Mount Vernon. Not for the first time on Indian, but something had changed since we were at Clear Place before. They had a way of subtly putting some signs, some little reminders as you got that these were spaces to be quiet. And it worked. And it was just, you walked the whole cemetery. People were talking quiet and being respectful and thinking. In Mount Vernon, they have now created a space where they are reburying the slaves. And it's a powerful image when you go there. But again, just little signs, just encouraging you to be respectful and quiet. And it worked. And I just thought of that as you were talking about trying to create this space.
Beautiful. Thanks for sharing. Sure. And I was just thinking back to that question too about the federal parks, and this is a complicated little piece of property, but it's literally contiguous to a city park, Waterworks Park, right? There's phase 1, phase 2 is just about to launch. There's that, and I'm never going to remember what this is called, but it's something like the Mississippi Scenic Byway, but federal designation. There's quite a jigsaw of governmental jurisdictions, and so it gives a lot of opportunity to leverage resources into this area. But I like this idea, and it's come up a few times now, of sort of teaching respect. And that's a simple way, right? Be quiet. Be quiet here as a way. Cool. Other thoughts on these points or on any points related to this? It's been a beautiful and thoughtful conversation. Yeah, please.
Hi, my name is Julia Rice. I'm not native, but 2 years ago I had the opportunity to learn about San Falls. I went to school for landscape architecture. Not at the U, unfortunately. and it's changed my life. I started learning about Dakota history. It's been very powerful, it's been very hard. But I just want to say thank you to everyone who came here and spoke. And I came to listen because I hope that I can do work like this, that I can facilitate, not lead, that I can listen and hopefully bring native cultures back to the lands that were taken from them and make, I think our futures are entwined. I think Dakota liberation is entwined with climate liberation, with a future we all can live in. So thank you, everybody.
Beautifully put, thank you, yeah. And another potential partnership, right? Young design students, there is a lot of interest in this little spot, I will say, and there's a lot of interest in this conversation that we're having here. So I'll just commend folks, and Carrie talked about getting contacted by tribes. We're getting contacted by local governments, state governments, federal government, just because we're framing this conversation in a different way, putting the native voices first. So that people are, how are you doing that? We've been trying to do this. How are you doing it? And I'll go back to Anita's word. It's trust, right? We started by working to build trust. And it's very hard to build and very easy to destroy.
You're taking a risk too.
Everyone is, right?
Everyone that's involved in this is taking a risk. Things will not change without a bit of risk, honestly. And as we said, this is the third community conversation that we've had. We've had a couple in the cities. And, as an Indian person, I've had to do the Indian 101, daily, just daily. So when we're having these conversations in a full room, I table hop. I go around, listen to what everybody is saying, and they see me coming, and it's like, oh, here she comes. We gotta ask her something. And more than once, and it does come out, you have to do a little bit of that Indian 101, we didn't know that you guys were still here, and where did you come from? Kind of thing. But that other question, and this is a zinger for me, well, are you just gonna come over here and put a casino over here? Because then we don't want all that traffic here in our place. We don't want all those lights and all this stuff going on here that you guys bring over here. And it's like, what? Excuse me? And I have to, hold myself back and be the facilitator that I am, and try and explain and do that Indian 101, and, again, no, if we wanted to build a casino here, you'd know about that, but that's not the case. That is not the case, and so for those people who are in Zoom out there, and if that was your burning question, no, not happening, it's not happening.
That's why our bull cat
We'll taboo it. Maybe a machine. You're fancy now. Right, go there, right, yeah. So and the Indian 101 piece, that's education. I mean, that's part of what this is, part of what this project can offer, this initiative can offer, and I think that's a good thing, right? And Carrie might sound like she's talking a little outrageously, but truthfully, and until just a few years ago, if you Googled image searched Native Americans or American Indians, the first 90 or so images that came up were from before 1915. And that's changed recently because of people like our Lieutenant Governor Brady and Congresswoman Sharice Davids and Secretary Deb Haaland, who are really rapidly shifting the narrative and the profile of Native people. But really, the Native people in a lot of Americans' minds were relegated to history, ancient. There was just a few years ago, a startling percentage of American people did not realize that American Indians still existed today. It was maybe half. Yeah.
I have a quick comment on that. and it refers to our elder friend here, citizenship. I've been working on the Minnesota Chippewa Tribe Constitution. I've been part of those discussions. And we are now going to put forward 2 ballot initiatives in June. Do you want to eliminate blood quantum as part of membership? And do you want your individual band to decide how to establish members? And for those of you out in Zoom, tribal membership is determined by blood quantum. You're half this, you're a quarter that. If you're not a quarter, then you're not at all. And it's part of assimilation. That's the way of elimination, definitely. And that was intentional. The only other living beings that are determined who or where they're from are horses and dogs, pedigrees. You're a quarter cockapoo, you're a quarter German shepherd. That's the way, and they put us there with that. I've been fighting like heck to get rid of that, because again, in my family, as I spoke about the bongos, sure, they were dark. So what? We didn't see that. We didn't see that at all. He was a hardworking man. He had, wanted his, I think he was actually fleeing from down south to get away from what was going on down there. And that Mr. Bonga, he worked hard. He worked darn hard. And the Indians recognized that and they brought him in. If you were good, you were a contributor, you followed the rules of the camp, you were part of that. It didn't matter. My cousin Larry Aiken, professor, we were talking, yeah, we're cousins, and he was telling me that they used to measure the length of your nose to see how much Indian you were, or they'd scratch your chest right here to see how quickly the blood would go back in. Just weird stuff.
It's super arbitrary. Thanks for sharing that. And for people who don't know, blood quantum, native identity, these are really current and sort of hot button issues within the native community. Firstly, discussed and debated. Carrie's talking about within Minnesota, the Minnesota Chippewa tribes. So that is 6 of the Ojibwe tribes. There's one that isn't, but we operate under a common constitution that was handed to us by the federal government that makes this blood quantum distinction. And ultimately what would happen is either you marry and procreate with someone from your tribe, or your children are less and less likely to be able to be recognized as native, to be enrolled in the tribe. So it is it's really more than assimilation, it's really about elimination. And it's very current right now, and many tribes are debating changing the rules, their own sovereignty.
I think that's why I had such a hard time with that whole word, exile and descendants and all of that. We're all one people, we're part of our villages and our place, and it just never, I just couldn't get to it. And all this research, none of those explanations made any sense to me whatsoever. And I think that's part of the reason why I fought so hard for the constitutional change. Because again, I keep thinking of Mr. Bonga and his and many others, white people and whiters, they were the allotment and all that stuff that went on, and it was a way to get rid of us. But you know what? We're still here.
We're still here.
And we will always honor that handshake in a good way, because we know that's a relative.
Well, that's one of the things I love about brothers and sisters, is how they always talk about life in terms of being a good relative.
Yeah.
Is that being a good relative? Like being a good relative. I respect that so much. Anything else? We're kind of getting closer to the end.
Oh, we should be wrapping up here.
Okay. Okay, so any last comments from folks assembled here?
Any Zoom?
Yeah, any Zoom comment? I'll just remind folks, we have a graphic recording. I don't know if folks are familiar with that, but it's an artist that's following this conversation and creating a large graphic piece that reflects this, what we're talking about here. And if you go to the website, you can see the graphic recordings from our earlier community conversations, and they're beautiful. And I finally saw one kind of in scale with a person next to it. They're huge too. And so the graphic recorders are joining us via Zoom. They've asked for permission to illustrate some of our in-person speakers in their artwork, as they have in the past, as simple sketches. So please come and speak to a member of the staff around the room if you are not comfortable with this, because we want to respect your wishes. Thank you. They're not like portraits or like obviously, and cartoons, you know, but they're beautiful, beautiful. Cool. Anything else here in the room? I forget who I'm supposed to call on to close this. Was that you, Carrie? No.
Yeah.
Cool.
Are these tickets?
Great.
We saved one good thing for the last.
Amanda, Margaret, is there anything else I'm supposed to be saying? Okay, we're cool. All right. So I really want to thank everyone that is here in the sovereign nation of Prairie Island to participate in this conversation, and folks who have joined via Zoom. I'll remind you the community conversations in the city of Minneapolis at the Convention Center. Our specific section is at 10:30, is that right? Yeah, just 10:30, great, at the Convention Center. Please join us. And in closing, for the folks who are here, right? Yeah. We're doing a little drawing, so thanks for joining us.
Okay.